Shabbat Shalom. I remember when I first really thought about the word detritus. It's a funny word. I was visiting my friend Liz, who is a marine biologist. She was working in a lab in Charleston, Oregon, located near a smelly shrimp processing factory. Liz showed me an experiment she was doing on clams, starfish, kelp, and other sea creatures, testing how they responded to light stimuli. The experiment was being conducted in a white basin, which was raised about sink level and had 4 inches of seawater in it. Liz told me about the mollusks of her experiment and the various other life forms in the basin. I picked up a large brown starfish. We also looked at crabs, kelp, sea sponges, slugs, and snails. I kept wondering, what do these crazy life forms eat? Liz told me that a lot of them, especially the smallest ones, simply feed off detritus. Detritus. I'd heard that word before. It certainly has a nice, maybe sophisticated sound to it, but what does it actually mean? Detritus is the microscopic organic material that is in seawater, Liz explained. I liked this word, and I liked the idea of microscopic richness floating around. Detritus is composed of dead plants and animals that have decomposed. Thinking about detritus means thinking about the circle of life, about how things decompose and then create the opportunity for more life. But more than that, detritus held me in awe because it speaks to the miraculousness of life. How is it that microscopic organic matter can sustain such life forms as kelp, sea sponges, and slugs? How do we go from swishing salt water and minerals to life? How is it that if you let salt water be, perhaps for millions of years, these crazy life forms appear? There are scientific answers to these questions, but looking at the organisms in the White Basin in Oregon, I was struck by the amazingness of it all. I know that death and the precariousness of life have been on the mind of many of us. As a congregation, we've experienced many deaths in the past month. Many of us have also been glued to the news as we watch a president come up against the limits of his age. Watching Joe Biden has made many of us think about our own limits and maybe our own mortality. Some of us tonight are mourning, and for all of us, considering death can naturally make us worried, sad, or anxious. At the same time, the fact of death can also motivate us to think about how lucky we are to have lived at all. Things could have happened very differently. Maybe millions of years ago, some detritus could have interacted differently, and the rest of natural history could have happened in some radically different way. Just like it's wild to consider how mollusks and kelp have come into existence, considering the shortness of all of our lives can give us a new appreciation for the lives that we have. It isn't easy to have this perspective. For one, it's hard to make sense of death. Our forebears wrestled with this question of how to think about death. In fact, in this week's Torah portion, Chukat, we read about one of the stranger reactions the people of the Torah had to death. This week, we read about the red heifer. In the biblical mind, coming into contact with a dead body led one to become ritually impure. And so, the Torah developed a strange ritual to enable folks to become pure again after encountering a corpse. Here's the ritual in all of its oddness. First, the people would select a red heifer, or a cow. The red heifer was taken outside the camp and slaughtered in the presence of a priest. The priest would then sprinkle some of the blood 7 times toward the front of the tent of meeting. The entire heifer, its hide, flesh, blood, was burned. Cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet wool were also thrown into the fire as the heifer was burned. The ashes from this fire were collected and stored in a clean place outside the camp. The ashes were mixed with fresh water to create water of purification. This mixture was then sprinkled on people or objects that had become ritually impure due to contact with a dead body. I share the entirety of this ritual because I think it reflects people coming to terms with the strangeness of death. It's hard to wrap one's mind about the fact that we have time on earth, time in which we are alive, and then it ends. I read the ritual of the red heifer as an effort to make sense of that. As the facts of existence and death are bizarre and arbitrary, so are the rituals of the red heifer. I wonder if this strangeness, what theologians call the contingency of being, can actually motivate us to appreciate our lives more. Life is short, life is hard to understand, and life is miraculous. Can all of this lead us to love our lives more? It seems this connection to the reason we read Kaddish, I see this connects to the reason we read Kaddish Yatom, what we know as Mourner's Kaddish when we do. Kaddish Yatom, which we will say together at the end of our services, is powerful in content and rhythmic and comforting in its form. But despite being the prayer we most closely associate with mourning, Kaddish Yatom doesn't mention death. Instead, it offers praise for the miraculousness of a higher power. It's quite an act of faith to offer praise to God at the moment when many of us are hurting the most. And yet, I think there's more to the choice of the Mourner's Kaddish than that. Is pairing Kaddish Yatom with our mourning practices, could the sages be telling us that an awareness of the shortness of life can lead us to appreciate creation even more? It's not always possible to go from an awareness of death to an appreciation of life. Sometimes we're hurting, sometimes we're scared, sometimes we miss our loved ones. And yet, there does seem to be a connection between the precariousness of life and an appreciation for what we do have. Whether it's the strangeness of the red heifer ritual, the amazing fact that each one of us exists, or the marvels of detritus in the ocean, life is, in fact, bizarre, arbitrary, and awe-inspiring. As much as we can, let's appreciate that while we still can. Shabbat Shalom.